Hey, we are back again with another discussion. This time around, we're going to be discussing uh, Gino Hernandez versus Chris Adams, the feud that was supposed to happen, but unfortunately did not due to unforeseen circumstances. And once again, I'm back with James Beard. James, thank you for joining me again.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michael.
So, I guess the first way to start it, or the best way to start it, would be um, in terms of Gino and Chris. Um, they were they a team when you first got to Dallas, or by the time you got to Dallas, or did they become a team?
No, they became a team after that. They were Gino came in as on his own. Actually, he actually just showed up at one of the Parade of Champions events, and um, not on the card, but he was there, and he came into Dallas, and he established himself as a singles wrestler first, and uh, it was later on that Chris actually got together, and that was after it had started managed by Gary Hart, and then they went through all of that period of time, and then they became a tag team, and they were quite a team actually.
Yeah, they were quite a good team. Um, why do you think that Chris and Gino gelled so well as a team?
I think the any good tag team usually one team member his weaknesses usually is I guess enhanced is strengthened by the other one's strengths, and that's kind of what this was. Chris was a great technical wrestler.
Yeah, he was.
He had all the ability in the world to wrestle with anybody in any place. In fact, I don't know how many times I've been in the ring with Chris, but Chris was a guy that always had good matches, and he was always uh, technically, actually technically brilliant. He was just incredible. He had his own personal demons, but inside about as good as it gets. Gino, on the other hand, was technically wasn't all that great. I mean, he was more of a character, more of a guy who knew how to get heat. You had great timing, but he wasn't really so much the athlete that Chris was, and I think their differences kind of made them strong as a team. You got a little bit of everything with both of them, and they kind of lived the gimmick, that they were high rolling and fun loving, and that kind of persona, and they were actually living it that way. So you got what you got with those two guys, and they just came across really well in the ring together. They just meshed really well.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like it. It seemed like they were um, a very good tag team, and maybe in a way very ahead of their time. Would you agree with that?
They were about as good as anybody around at the time. I think they could have been better if they had a little bit more time, and depending on who you put them against and that kind of thing. But tag team is a unique situation. It takes some time to develop. I guess not just timing and all, but with kind of having a second sense about what your partner's going to do and that sort of thing, and that takes time to develop. Um, and this is a specialty thing too. Tag team wrestling is a little different, and both of those guys were well known as singles wrestlers, so they were just kind of beginning to become that good as a team, and it kind of fell apart. But
Yeah, yeah,
I think they could have been very good together if they had stayed together for a long time, I think.
yeah. Um, would you say that maybe that world class at that time, or in general, was always weak in terms of tag team wrestling and more focused on singles?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the tag team division at that period of time was basically the Von Erichs against whoever, you know, and there weren't a lot of established teams that came in. I mean, and I would get my dates mixed up, but they had the Midnight Express that came in for a while, and the Fantastics came in for a while, and that was about it. Most of the time, the tag team division was about putting somebody against the Von Erichs and that sort of thing. And that's really kind of what Chris and Gino did. They were kind of like a team against the Von Erichs at the time. The Freebirds went around, so that was about all that was left as far as the heel side of things go to challenge the Von Erich boys. And the tag team division wasn't really stressed so much, but they made it interesting for a while there with those guys.
Do you think that hurt Chris and Gino's longevity because there really wasn't anybody else to face other than the Von Erichs?
As a tag team, probably, yeah. I think it hurt. I think that probably hurt a lot of teams. I mean, they brought Midnight Express. I think is one of the greatest tag teams in history of wrestling, and they brought them in, and Fritz thought they were too small to work with the Von Erich boys, which I think is insane. But so they brought Bobby and Tommy in to work with them, and so they kind of had their own little thing going over here. When I think it probably could have been just great. It'd be incredible with the Midnight Express against the Von Erich. So, the tag team division just wasn't as important to the higher ups at the time. So it's kind of a shame, but that's the way it worked. And of course, because Chris and Gino were put together basically to go against those guys, and because they had such history and already had established names here and all that kind of thing. So. They're just once that was done, then there wasn't really anywhere else for them to go.
Yeah. Do you? Well, I mean, I think I would have to ask. In terms of the two versions of the dynamic duo, Chris and Gino and Gino and Tully.
Yeah.
Did you have any experience with Gino when he was with Tully, or just him and Chris?
No, just him and Chris. Gino and Tully were a good team because Tully really had a grasp of tag team wrestling, and that's obvious when he teamed with Arn. It became such a great team. They along with the Midnight Express and some others I could name. They're definitely upper echelon in the history of tag team wrestling. And, so having a guy like that included that understood that style well as Tully did, but I didn't have any personal experience with them together. I just know that they were a good team.
Yeah, yeah. Now, well, this might be a stretch, but this is that's sort of the point of this discussion, to stretch your memory, see what you can remember.
Some people believe that's not very far stretch.
At this point, which I do believe was late. Around the summer of '85, or in the later part of '85, because I do believe Gino passed away in February '86.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea what the long-term plans were for Gino and Chris in terms of their feud?
Against each other, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that had the potential to be a very high-profile. I guess high profile feud. I mean, those guys. The whole thing was established. They had the history, and I think that because of Gino's ability to get heat and how good he was in the ring as far as timing and all is concerned. I think he and Chris would have had some classic stuff. I mean, I think it had the potential to really be good, and probably would have elevated world class a little bit at the time, and it needed it.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that going on that wasn't exactly conducive to great business, and that would have probably helped it.
Do you think that Gino and Chris could have maybe had a similar effect on the territory that the Von Erichs and the Freebirds feud did?
Well, I mean, that's comparing something that's almost historically great. It's hard to say. Um, the I think it could have been really good, and I think it had potential to prop up the territory at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly bring a lot of interest into it. As far as comparing it to the Freebirds and Von Erichs, that's that's a tough nut to crack there. I mean, that's about as good as it gets in the history of wrestling. So that's a hard thing to compare to.
Yeah. Um. Now, I know there's a long list of talent, especially back in the day, that never won the NWA World Title, but a lot of people thought they could have. Would you say that Gino was one of those people that could have held the world title?
That's a tough one. I think Gino. I mean, any of those guys are of that quality of performer could probably do that, but I don't think Gino would have been the perfect world champion in NWA anyway, because I mean, he could have done it. I'm not saying he couldn't have done it, and he probably would have been effective for a while, but that takes a special man. I mean, it takes somebody who really knows how to make other guys look good and is really technically proficient. Gino was a heat machine. If you took him into a territory where he was going against another heat machine, then I don't know how well that would work. It's a hard thing to say. For a short period of time, I can see that happening, but I couldn't see him being a long-term answer.
Do you think
And
that? Oh,
Gino wasn't all that big, so
yeah.
that's another factor too.
Do you think that, like, very similar to how? Let me rephrase. Wait. Do you think that Gino would have had to have maybe flipped face to become champion, and that's why it wouldn't have worked, because it seems like being a babyface was a big weakness for him?
Not necessarily. I think he probably would have been more effective as a heel champion. Going in kind of being the
Yeah.
chicken shit heel type thing. I don't think Gino's strength would have been as a baby face. I mean, he was one early on, and he was effective early on, but I think his natural personality and his way of working and his greatest strength was to get heat. So, I think he was in the right place as far as his value is concerned. But I just don't see Gino being a long-term answer as a world champion, not in the NWA anyway.
Mm, mm. Um. Now, as we look, as you look back, I do believe that, if my memory serves me correctly, Gino did pass away in February of '86.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'm not good with dates, as you know. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
With all things considered, and this actually being what would be the 30-year anniversary of his passing, would you say that his passing had maybe just as much an effect on world class and its fans as the Von Erich passing, and
Uh, no, well,
well,
no, I'm not because they were the binaries are different. I mean, that's a whole different thing. It's almost like comparing it to paying him Chris against with the front binaries and the Freebirds. It's a level there that it definitely had an effect, but it was more like a piling on of bad things that had happened. And it just almost got to the point to where one more bad thing and everything's going to fall apart, and that's kind of what that contributed to. It certainly didn't help, and it certainly was a blow to the promotion because Gino was an important part of it at the time. But to say that it had the same effect as David passing away, or when Kerry did, or even when Michael, for that matter. That would be a stretch, I would think.
okay, I can understand that. Um, as well, um, I now I'm gonna test myself again. In terms, when Kerry won the title from Ric Flair, when he won the NWA title, I
Right.
do believe that was a parade of champions. Am I right?
It was the very first Parade of Champions, and that was in I think it was in May of 1984. How about that? The only reason I'm fairly sure about that is I'm writing an article right now for this current Parade of Champions, and I've been doing a little research, so I cheated.
No, I picked a good time to ask then. Do you think that someone else, like maybe a Gino or even a Chris, would have been a better person to put in that position than Kerry?
No, no. I'm not sure that winning that title helped Kerry all that much. It helped the fans. It made the fans feel good. Um, and I think Kerry, holding it for 2 weeks, I think may have hurt him more than it helped him. Uh, if Kerry had been of the right frame of mind and capable of holding it for like 6 months or something like that, I think that would have changed a lot of things as far as perception of Kerry goes. But but to say that Chris or Gino would have been better in that position, no, because the whole point of that title run was to pay homage and to uh, it's kind of a throwing a little bit of something to the fans. It was more that than anything else. Um, I wish it had been more. I wish that it could have been a more substantial run for Kerry, but because of a lot of things, it wasn't ever meant to be. It was strictly kind of giving a nod to the promotion, giving a nod to David, and giving a nod to the wrestling fans of world class.
Mm-hmm.
No, nobody with me would have meant as much, other than maybe Kevin.
Do you think Kevin would have been a better choice to be champion?
Uh, no, no, because Kerry Kerry was special. He was maybe the most charismatic wrestler I've ever been in the ring with, and I mean that compared to anybody. Period. He just naturally was charismatic, and he was the guy that the fans wanted to see win, and that was the most effective choice that they could have made at the time. Like I said, I'm not sure that it was all that great for Kerry himself for his career, but I believe that for the fans' sake and for the purpose that the change was made, Kerry was the absolute perfect choice for
Mm.
Kevin was a great athlete, Kevin didn't have the charisma that Kerry had, and just a natural relationship to the fans that Kerry had. Kevin was a little bit more, I guess, had a little bit of. Kevin always kept a little space between him and everybody else, and the fans believed they could reach out and touch Kerry, and that was important in making that decision, I think.
Mm-hmm. If uh, if somebody from today, if you had the opportunity to, I guess, like, if somebody asked you the best quality of Gino, I know you said the best quality of Chris before was his technical ability.
Right.
If somebody asked you what the best quality of Gino was, and what maybe someone from today could learn from him, what would you say that was?
What I talked about a little earlier, I think one of the most important things in wrestling, and it's something that you can learn, but very few have a natural instinct for it, and that's timing and pacing. And Gino was absolutely master of those things. No matter what else he might have done in the ring, or no matter what else he may have had deficiencies in as far as technical ability and all of that is concerned, his timing and his pacing, his ability to know when things and how to do them exactly at the right time and in the right way to make it work and more effective. That was his greatest skill, and that's something that only experience or being exceptionally gifted can give you. And Gino had a little bit of both of those things. He had a natural gift for it, plus he had gained a lot of experience in knowing how to do those things, and he was just a master at that, and that was his greatest value.
Since we're talking about it, and how much of an influence do you think Jose Lothario had on Gino and his in-ring ability?
Oh, a great deal, because Jose was that way. Jose had that kind of timing. He had that kind of. Jose had a natural appeal too. He had a charisma that it worked differently than Gino's, because Jose was definitely a fan favorite, a babyface, just a natural one, and Gino was just the opposite. But it still worked because he learned how to use that natural gift that he had in the same kind of way that Jose knew how to use it. So I'm certain that a lot of that rubbed off on Gino by spending so much time around Jose when he was younger.
Yeah. Well, since they were both trained by the same person, do you see any similarities with Gino and Shawn Michaels?
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, I do. A lot of similarities in those aspects that I talked about. The difference is that Shawn, incredible athlete, much more athletic than Gino.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, you could say Shawn is a modern, souped-up version of Gino Hernandez. So yeah, I see that.
You must have read my mind, because my next question was going to be, if you had to pick, who would you say is a modern Gino?
Well, I don't see a lot of those kinds of guys out there right now, but Shawn, when Shawn was in his prime, he was that. He had all those traits that I talked about, like I said, and
Mhm.
timing, the pacing, the ability to just know when and how to do things at the right time and how to do them in the right way that would affect. And those were Gino's traits. The difference, like I said, is that Sean was incredibly athletic, and he did a lot of exciting things along with those traits, and
Mhm.
so that, like I said, that just made him a souped up version of the same guy.
Mhm. Well,
Luckily, Sean lived long enough to change a lot of his personality ways.
yeah.
That's Gino. They both kind of lived the gimmick. They both kind of had that attitude. They were not necessarily easy to work with for some people. I actually had no problem myself personally. In fact, I enjoyed working with Sean a lot. But I know that there were some that found him difficult to work with. It's the
Mhm.
same as some found Gino frustrating because of his lifestyle and the way he dealt with people in some cases, and Sean was a lot like that too. Luckily, Sean grew up and lived over that and changed, but Gino never got that opportunity.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very unfortunate side effect of some people just aren't able to get past their demons.
Yeah,
Um.
that's true. Shame.
Yeah. It is a shame. So I'll talk to you again soon, and once again enjoy WrestleMania weekend.
Thank you, Michael. Talk to you later, man.
Yep.
All right, bye bye.